Anna thought she had left the monsters behind in the city, back on that crowded train where humanity had failed her. She had come to the frozen edge of the world to survive, to trade the cruelty of men for the indifferent silence of the mountains. But when a blizzard buried her cabin in white, scratching at her door wasn't the wind. It was a choice. On her porch lay death and desperation. Two massive wolves, one broken, one pleading. Survival dictated she bolt the door and let nature take its course. Compassion demanded she risk everything. She didn't know that by saving them, she was inviting the wildest kind of love into her life, or that the monsters she feared were nothing compared to the twin alphas she was about to heal. Chapter 1. The rifle felt heavy and cold in Anna's hands. A dead weight that did nothing to stop the trembling in her fingers. Outside, the blizzard screamed like a living thing, tearing at the shingles of the grandfather's cabin she now called a fortress. But it wasn't the wind that had driven her from her armchair, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. It was the sound. Distinct. Deliberate. The scrape of something heavy against the wood of the front door. Anna leveled the barrel at the heavy oak, her breath misting in the drafty room. The forecast had promised a storm, but not this apocalypse of ice and fury. For 3 months she had lived in absolute isolation, a self-imposed exile to scrub the memory of the city from her skin. No one came up here. No one knew she was here. If someone was at her door in this weather, they weren't looking for shelter. They were hunting. The memory of the train car flashed in her mind. The men, the jeers, the way the other passengers had looked down at their phones while she screamed. Not again, she thought, her grip tightening on the stock. I won't be a victim again. Another scratch. This time accompanied by a sound that made the hair on her arms stand up. Not a voice, not a shout, but a high-pitched, desperate whine. It cut through the howling wind, piercing the walls, piercing her fear. It sounded like agony. Anna hesitated. Her finger hovered over the safety. If it was a bear, she was dead. If it was a man, she might be dead. But that sound, it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a plea. Moving with the slow, agonizing caution of a woman walking underwater, she crept toward the window adjacent to the door. The glass was thick with frost. A kaleidoscope of ice obscuring the world outside. She reached out, her warm palm melting a small, clear circle in the rime. She leaned in, steeling herself for the face of a stranger, or the void of the storm. She saw neither. Anna stumbled back, the rifle nearly slipping from her sweat-slicked palms. Her heart slammed into her throat, choking her. "No," she whispered, the word lost in the roar of the fire. Wolves. 2 of them. Massive, prehistoric things that made the coyotes she'd seen earlier that winter look like house cats. They were huddled on her porch, pressed against the doorframe as if seeking the warmth leaking through the cracks. The one closest to the window was a towering beast of silver and gray, its fur matted with ice. It was standing over a second, darker wolf, a black shadow against the snow, that lay collapsed in a heap. The silver wolf turned, its head snapped toward the window, and for a terrifying second, amber eyes locked onto Anna's through the glass. There was no aggression in that gaze, no mindless hunger. There was only a terrifying, undeniable intelligence. The beast looked at her, then looked down at its fallen companion, then back at her. It pawed at the door again, a frantic, rhythmic scratch. "Help us." The thought wasn't hers. It felt projected, slammed into her mind by the sheer intensity of the animal's stare. The black wolf didn't move. A streak of crimson stained the pristine snow beneath its hind leg, bright and shocking. It was bleeding out. Anna looked at the lock. She looked at the rifle. Every survival instinct she possessed screamed at her to back away, to barricade the door, to let nature take its tithe. They were apex predators. Killing machines. But the silver wolf let out another howl, a sound so full of grief it cracked the ice around Anna's heart. She wasn't on the train anymore. She wasn't helpless, and she couldn't watch another living thing beg for help and do nothing. Chapter 2. The latch felt like ice under her fingers, freezing the skin instantly. Anna took a breath that tasted of wood smoke and terror, glancing one last time at the heavy iron bolt. If she threw this, there was no going back. The wind battered the wood, as if the storm itself was trying to break in. "Just breathe and be," she whispered, her grandfather's mantra trembling on her lips. "Don't think. Just act." She yanked the bolt back. The wind didn't wait for an invitation. It kicked the door open with violence, blasting Anna with a wall of snow and air so cold it felt like a physical blow. She staggered back, shielding her eyes, the rifle uselessly clutched in one hand. The silver wolf didn't lunge. It didn't snarl. It moved with a desperate, fluid efficiency. It grabbed the scruff of the fallen black wolf's neck, its massive jaws clamping down gently, and began to drag the dead weight across the threshold. "Come on!" Anna yelled over the wind, though she didn't know who she was encouraging, the wolves or herself. The black wolf was heavy, limp, its paws leaving trails of blood on her hardwood floor. The silver wolf strained, its claws scrabbling for purchase on the smooth wood, muscles rippling beneath the wet fur. It hauled its companion 3 feet inside, just enough to clear the doorframe. Anna threw her shoulder against the door. The wind fought her, a pressurized wall pushing back, but she gritted her teeth and shoved. Screaming with the effort, inch by inch she forced the heavy oak closed against the storm, finally slamming the bolt home with a finality that echoed like a gunshot. Silence returned, sudden and ringing. Anna spun around, her back pressed against the door, her chest heaving. The reality of what she had done crashed down on her. The cabin was small, impossibly small, and now, taking up the entirety of her living room rug, were 2 wolves. The black wolf lay motionless, its breathing shallow and ragged. The silver wolf stood over it, shaking the snow from its coat, sending a spray of water across her books and furniture. Then, it went still. Slowly, deliberately, the silver beast turned its massive head toward her. Anna raised the rifle, her hands shaking so badly the barrel wavered. "Stay back," she croaked. Don't move." The wolf stared at the gun, then up at her eyes. It let out a soft huff, a sound that sounded dangerously like a sigh of relief. And then, defying every predatory instinct, it lowered itself to the floor. It curled its body around the injured black wolf, placing its head on its paws, eyes fixed on Anna, waiting. Anna lowered the gun inches. She looked at the black wolf's leg. Now that they were out of the snow, the injury was horrific. It wasn't just a cut. The leg was mangled, twisting at an unnatural angle, and wrapped tight around the shin was a circle of rusted, serrated metal. A trap. A poacher's trap. The metal had bitten deep, down to the bone. The flesh around it was swollen and angry. If that trap didn't come off, the infection would kill the wolf within days, if the blood loss didn't take it tonight. Anna looked at the silver wolf. He was watching her gaze. He nudged the black wolf's nose gently, then looked back at Anna, his amber eyes burning with an expectation that terrified her. He wasn't just sheltering from the storm. He had brought his packmate to her for a reason. She took a step forward. The silver wolf's ears twitched, but he didn't growl. "I can't help him if you kill me," she whispered to the beast. She took another step. The silver wolf watched, his body tense as a coiled spring. Anna was 3 feet away now. She could smell them: wet fur, pine, copper blood, and something else. Something muskier, like ozone and rain. She knelt, placing the rifle on the floor beside her. A peace offering. Or a suicide note. Chapter 3. The heat radiating from the wolves was immense, a furnace against the chill of the floor. Up close, they were terrifyingly large. The silver wolf's head was the size of her torso. If he decided to snap, he could take her arm off at the shoulder before she could blink. Anna forced her breathing to slow. She reached for her first aid kit, which sat on the coffee table, dragging it closer without breaking eye contact with the silver guardian. "I have to touch him," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. "I have to hurt him to get it off." The silver wolf blinked, slowly. It was a gesture of consent so human it made Anna's stomach flip. She turned her attention to the black wolf. He was conscious, barely. His eyes were squeezed shut, his breathing hitching with every pulse of pain. Anna reached out, her fingers hovering over the metal trap. The springs were rusted, the mechanism barbaric. She would need leverage. "Okay," she murmured. "Okay." She grabbed the heavy iron shears from her fireplace tool set. She positioned the jaws of the shears against the spring of the trap. "This is going to hurt," she warned. She bore down. The metal groaned. The black wolf's eyes snapped open, shockingly blue, like glacial ice, and he let out a sharp, strangled yelp. He thrashed, his jaws snapping blindly at the air inches from Anna's face. Anna flinched back, bracing for the bite. A low, vibrating growl erupted from the silver wolf. He placed a heavy paw firmly on the black wolf's shoulder, pinning him down. He ducked his head, licking the black wolf's ear vigorously, making soothing, rumbling sounds deep in his chest. "Hold still," he seemed to be saying. "Let her work." The black wolf whined, his blue eyes meeting Anna's. There was fear there, raw and naked, but also trust. He stopped thrashing. He went limp under his companion's paw. Anna's hands were shaking, but she forced them still. "Almost there," she gritted out. She leaned her entire body weight onto the shears. Snap. The tension released. The jaws of the trap sprang open. Anna quickly worked the serrated teeth out of the mangled flesh. The black wolf didn't make a sound this time, just a sharp intake of breath. Blood welled up, fresh and bright. Anna grabbed the gauze and antiseptic. She flushed the wound, packed it, and wrapped it tight with efficient, practiced movements. "It's done," she whispered, sitting back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead. "It's off." The silver wolf lifted his head. He looked at the bandaged leg, then at Anna. He leaned forward. Anna froze. He stretched his neck out and pressed his wet nose against her cheek. He inhaled deeply, taking in her scent, before pulling back. It wasn't a threat. It was a thank you. But as his fur brushed her skin, Anna felt something that made no sense. A static shock like touching a live wire zinged through her body. It wasn't just static electricity. It felt like a hum, a resonance that vibrated in her teeth and settled deep in her belly. She looked at the silver wolf, startled. His amber eyes were wide, pupils blown, as if he had felt it too. For a heartbeat, the cabin faded. The storm faded. There was just the woman and the wolf, connected by a spark that shouldn't exist between species. Then the silver wolf blinked and looked away, breaking the spell. He turned back to his companion, curling around him again, licking the blood from the floor. Anna sat there, trembling, her hand rising to touch the spot on her cheek where he had sniffed her. She had saved them. But looking at the intelligent, burning gaze of the silver wolf, She had the sinking feeling that her life was no longer her own. Chapter 4. By the second day, the blizzard had buried the windows, turning the cabin into a dimly lit cave of firelight and shadows. Time had lost its meaning, measured only by the rhythmic breathing of the wolves and the crackle of the hearth. A strange domesticity had settled over the small space. It terrified Anna, even as she found herself leaning into it. She stood at the stove, stirring the last of her venison stew. The smell filled the room, rich and savory. Behind her, she heard the click of claws on wood. She turned. The silver wolf, she had started calling him in her mind, capitalized and significant, was sitting by the kitchen island, watching her. "Hungry?" she asked. He chuffed, a soft sound of affirmation. Anna ladled a generous portion into a ceramic bowl and set it on the floor. He waited for her to step back before eating, his manners impeccable. The black wolf, Shadow, she called him, for how he disappeared into the dark corners of the room, was still weak, sleeping by the fire, but he had eaten earlier from her hand. Anna took her own bowl and sat in the armchair. The silver wolf finished eating and padded over to her. He didn't return to his brother. Instead, he sat at her feet, his back resting against her legs. The weight of him was grounding, solid. "I used to hate the silence," Anna found herself saying. She hadn't spoken aloud in weeks. The words felt rusty. "That's why I came here, to get used to it, to learn how to be alone so no one could hurt me again." The wolf tilted his head back, looking up at her upside down. "There were so many people on that train," she whispered, staring into the fire, "shoulder to shoulder, and when those men cornered me, when I screamed, nobody looked up. They just turned the volume up on their headphones." A tear slipped down her cheek. She angrily wiped it away. "I decided then, monsters are real, but they look like men in suits, at least out here, at least with you. I know what you are." The wolf shifted. He turned his body and rested his heavy chin on her knee. His amber eyes were soft, filled with a sorrow so profound it stole the breath from her lungs. He pushed his head into her hand, demanding contact. Anna wove her fingers into his thick, silver ruff. He was warm, safe. "I'm crazy," she murmured, "talking to a wolf like you're my therapist." But he didn't pull away. He stayed there until the fire burned down to embers. That night, Anna retreated to her bedroom. She closed the door, the habit of locking it hard to break. She climbed into her cold sheets, curling into a ball. The wind howled outside, sounding like screams. The memories lurked at the edge of her sleep, the faces of the men on the train, the feeling of hands grabbing her. She squeezed her eyes shut. "Go away." The bedroom door handle turned. Anna bolted upright, gasping. The latch clicked. The door creaked open. Silhouette in the doorway against the dying firelight. It was the silver wolf. He had opened the door. He padded into the room, his claws silent on the rug. He didn't look at her. He walked to the side of the bed between her and the door, circled 3 times and collapsed with a heavy thud. He let out a long exhale, resting his nose on his paws, facing the entrance. He was guarding her. Anna stared at the silver shape in the darkness. Her heart, which had been racing with fear, slowly synchronized with the steady rhythm of the wolf's breathing. He wasn't guarding the door to keep her in. He was guarding it to keep the nightmares out. For the first time in months, Anna closed her eyes and didn't see the train. She saw amber eyes, promising safety. She drifted off, unaware that the beast beside her was listening to her heartbeat, his vow of protection silent but absolute. But as dawn approached, the static in the air grew heavier, and the impossible was about to happen. Chapter 5. Sunlight, brilliant and blinding, was what woke Anna. It streamed through the bedroom window, reflecting off the diamond dust snow outside with an intensity that burned her eyes. She sat up, disoriented, the heavy silence of the cabin pressing against her eardrums. The howling wind was gone. The storm had broken. She looked to the rug beside her bed. It was empty. The indentation of a heavy body remained in the pile of the carpet, along with a few strands of silver fur, but her guardian was gone. Panic, sharp and irrational, spiked in her chest. She threw off the covers, ignoring the biting cold of the room, and scrambled into the living room. "Silver?" she called out, her voice cracking with sleep. They were by the door, both of them. The silver wolf stood at attention, his posture rigid, staring at the handle. But it was the sight of the black wolf, Shadow, that stopped Anna dead in her tracks. Yesterday he had been a heap of misery, his leg a mangled ruin that should have left him crippled for weeks, if not permanently. Today he was standing. He wasn't just standing. He was pacing. He put weight on the injured leg, favoring it only slightly. The bandage Anna had applied was tattered, hanging loose from where he had gnawed at it. "No," Anna whispered, approaching slowly. "That's not possible." Shadow turned to her, his tail giving a tentative, low wag. He looked bright-eyed, the blue irises clear of the pain haze that had clouded them the night before. Anna dropped to her knees, her hands trembling as she reached for the leg. Silver watched her, his head lowered, but he didn't intervene. She peeled back the loose gauze. She expected infection. She expected raw meat and exposed bone. What she found was a jagged pink scar. The skin had knit together with a speed that defied biology. The swelling was gone. The muscle felt firm under her fingers. It looked like a wound that was months old, not days. "How?" she breathed, looking up at Shadow. "You were dying." Shadow licked her nose, a quick, affectionate rasp of his tongue as if to say, "Don't worry about it." Anna sat back on her heels, her mind reeling. She was a photographer, an observer of nature. She knew healing rates. She knew infection. This wasn't natural. It was miraculous. Or it was something else entirely. Silver chuffed, a sharp sound that drew her attention. He was looking at the door, then back at her. The message was clear. It's time. The storm had passed, and the wild was calling them back. A hollow ache opened in Anna's chest. For 3 days, her fear had been replaced by purpose, by companionship. Now, the solitude she had fought so hard to achieve felt like a sentence. "You have to go," she said, her voice hollow. She stood and unlocked the door. The cold air rushed in, crisp and clean. The world outside was a blinding white canvas, the drifts piled high against the porch rails. Shadow trotted out first, sinking chest deep into the powder. He bounded forward, testing the leg, turning a circle in the snow before looking back. Silver didn't run. He walked onto the porch, stopped at the top of the stairs, and turned to face Anna. He looked her up and down, cataloging her one last time. Then, with a grace that sent a shiver down her spine, he lowered his front half. He didn't crouch to spring. He bowed. It was a deliberate, courtly gesture, his head dipping low, his amber eyes never leaving hers. It was an acknowledgement of a debt, a mark of respect between equals. Then he turned and launched himself into the snow, carving a path after his brother. Anna stood in the doorway, shivering in her thin pajamas, watching until the forest swallowed the flash of silver and the shadow of black, leaving her entirely, utterly alone. Chapter 6. The silence was a physical weight. It pressed against the windows. settled in the corners of the room, and sat heavy on Anna's chest. Before the wolves, silence had been her shield. Now, it was just emptiness. Anna tried to return to her routine. She developed film in her makeshift darkroom. She chopped wood. She read by the fire. But every sound, the settling of the timber, the wind in the chimney, made her head snap up. Hoping for the scratch of claws on the door, there was nothing. By the third day, she felt pathetic. "They're wolves," she scolded herself, scrubbing a dish with unnecessary force. "They don't write thank you notes. They survive." But the next morning, she found the first gift. She opened the door to check the thermometer and nearly stepped on it. Lying precisely in the center of the doormat was a geode. It had been cracked open, revealing a glittering heart of purple amethyst. It wasn't something dropped by a bird. It was heavy, the size of a grapefruit. It had been placed there. Anna picked it up, the stone freezing in her palm. She scanned the tree line. "Silver?" she whispered. The trees gave no answer. 2 days later, it was a shed antler, a magnificent piece of bone from a bull elk. It was leaning against her doorframe. The day after that, a pile of winter berries, wrapped carefully in a large frozen leaf. They weren't the gifts of a predator. A cat brought dead mice. A dog brought a stick. These were treasures, curated, aesthetic objects. Anna began to spend her afternoons on the porch, wrapped in her grandfather's down coat, her camera with its long telephoto lens resting on her knee. She told herself she was photographing the winter birds, the cardinals and the jays that flashed like jewels against the snow. But her lens kept drifting to the edge of the forest. It was late afternoon on the 7th day when she saw him. She was scanning the dense pine grove 300 yards away. Through the viewfinder, the world was compressed, the details sharp. She panned past a spruce tree and stopped. There, sitting in the shadows, perfectly camouflaged against the bark and snow, was Silver. He wasn't hunting. He wasn't moving. He was sitting on his haunches, facing the cabin, facing her. Anna's breath hitched. She zoomed in. The lens magnified his face. He wasn't just looking at the house. He was looking right into the lens. His expression was unreadable, stoic, and intense. But he didn't flinch as she focused on him. He hadn't left. He hadn't gone back to some distant territory. He was patrolling. He was watching her house. "You're still here," she whispered, lowering the camera. As if he could hear her whisper across the expanse of snow, Silver stood up. He didn't run away. He simply turned his head, checked the perimeter of the woods, and faded back into the shadows, a silent sentinel guarding a castle that didn't know it was under siege. Chapter 7. Emboldened by the sighting, Anna pushed the boundaries of her self-imposed prison. The next morning, she didn't just stand on the porch. She marched down the steps, shovel in hand, to clear a path to the main woodpile. The snow was deep, the work grueling, but the physical exertion felt good. It burned away the anxiety that had been buzzing under her skin. She was bent over, tossing a heavy load of slush aside, when the hair on the back of her neck stood up. It wasn't the prickly fear of being hunted. It was the hum of being observed. She straightened and turned. Silver was standing 10 feet away. He had approached without a sound, a ghost in the daylight. He stood on top of a snowdrift, looking down at her. Up close, without the barrier of glass or the chaos of the storm, he was breathtaking. His winter coat was thick and lustrous, putting any husky or Malamute she'd ever seen to shame. "Hi," she said softly, leaning on her shovel. "Checking up on me?" He tilted his head, that maddeningly human gesture. He took a step down the drift, sliding slightly on the powder, closing the distance. He stopped just out of arm's reach. Anna slowly reached into her pocket and pulled out her smaller, portable camera. "Can I?" she asked. He didn't bolt. He sat down, wrapping his tail around his paws, and stared directly into the lens. He posed. There was no other word for it. He turned his head slightly to catch the light, highlighting the amber of his eyes. Anna clicked the shutter. Once. Twice. The sound was loud in the quiet air, but he didn't flinch. "You're a show-off," she laughed, the sound bubbling up unexpectedly. She took a step forward, lowering the camera, wanting to bridge the gap, wanting to sink her fingers into that fur again. But her boot found a patch of ice hidden beneath the fresh powder. Her feet went out from under her. It happened in a blur. Gravity took hold, sending her tipping backward toward the jagged edge of the woodpile. She flailed, bracing for the impact of sharp bark and hard ice against her spine. She never hit the ground. A blur of silver motion slammed into her. It wasn't a collision. It was an interception. Teeth clamped onto the thick collar of her down coat, and with a jerk of terrifying power, she was hauled upright. Anna stumbled, finding her footing, gasping for air. She was standing. She was safe. And standing on his hind legs, his front paws resting heavily on her shoulders, was Silver. He towered over her. In this position, he was taller than she was. His face was inches from hers, his hot breath washing over her frozen cheeks. He still had a grip on her coat collar, holding her steady. Anna froze, staring into those amber eyes. The strength required to catch a falling human and hoist them back up. It wasn't just leverage. It was raw, unnatural power. But it was the look in his eyes that stopped her heart. It wasn't the look of an animal ensuring its food source didn't spoil. It was panic, pure, terrified concern. He slowly released her collar, dropping back to all fours. But he didn't back away. He nudged her hip with his nose, checking for injury. "I'm okay," she whispered, her voice trembling. You caught me." He looked up at her, and for a second Anna saw the man behind the beast. The intelligence was too sharp. The worry too complex. He wasn't just a wolf, and as she stared at him, terrifying realization dawned. He was stronger than any animal had the right to be, and he cared about her more than any human ever had. Chapter 8. Before Anna could process the impossibility of the rescue, a yip echoed from the trees. Shadow burst from the tree line, moving with a chaotic, puppy-like energy that completely contrasted Silver's regal stoicism. He bounded through the snow, ears flopping, and skidded to a halt beside them. He didn't have Silver's reserve. Shadow launched himself at Anna, planting his front paws on her waist and licking her chin before she could even say hello. "Hey, down!" Anna laughed, staggering back under his weight. Shadow dropped down but immediately grabbed the sleeve of her coat, tugging gently. He growled playfully, his tail wagging so hard his entire back half shook. He wanted to play. Silver let out a low, warning huff, but Shadow ignored him. He released Anna's sleeve, scooped up a mouthful of snow, and tossed it into the air, barking at the flakes. Anna watched them, the scene surreal. Here she was, a woman who flinched when the mailman walked too close to her on the sidewalk, currently standing in the wilderness engaging in playtime with two apex predators. Shadow nudged the back of her knee with his nose, nearly buckling her leg. Anna retaliated, scooping up a handful of snow and dropping it on his head. Shadow sneezed, shook himself wildly, and zoomed in a circle around her. Anna laughed. It started as a chuckle, then grew into a full-throated belly laugh that echoed off the trees. It felt foreign in her throat. She hadn't laughed like this since before the train, since before she learned that the world was a cold, indifferent place. At the sound of her laughter, Silver stopped watching the perimeter. He turned his head, his eyes fixing on her face, His expression softened. The intensity faded, replaced by something warm and satisfied. He walked over, ignoring his brother's antics, and leaned his heavy body against her leg. A solid, warm anchor. Anna rested her hand on Silver's head while Shadow chewed on her bootlaces. The fear was gone. The isolation was gone. "I trust you," she whispered into the cold air, realizing it was true. She looked at the wolves. In the city, surrounded by thousands of people, she had been in constant danger. Here, surrounded by teeth and claws, she was safe. She was protected. But as she looked down at Silver, seeing the way he watched the forest behind her back, she realized something else. He wasn't just visiting. He wasn't just playing. He was on duty. He stiffened under her hand. His ears swiveled forward. The playfulness vanished from Shadow instantly, replaced by a lethal stillness. Silver let out a low growl, the vibration traveling up Anna's leg. He wasn't growling at her. He was growling at something in the woods. Anna followed his gaze. At the edge of her property, where the driveway met the main road, fresh tire tracks cut through the pristine snow, and hanging from a branch, flashing in the sun, was a strip of neon orange surveyor's tape. Man was coming back to the mountain, and looking at the bared fangs of the wolves beside her, Anna knew that this time, the monsters weren't going to be the ones on 4 legs. Chapter 9. The darkness of the bedroom wasn't empty. It was suffocating. In the deepest part of the night, the safety of the cabin walls dissolved, replaced by the rattling metal of a subway car. The smell of wood smoke vanished, overtaken by the stench of stale sweat, ozone, and cheap cologne. Anna tossed in her sheets, tangled in a nightmare that refused to loose its grip. She was back there. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting jerky shadows across the faces of the 3 men surrounding her. She couldn't move. Her voice was trapped in her throat, a scream that wouldn't break the surface. Around her, passengers looked at their phones, looked at their shoes, looked anywhere but at the woman begging with her eyes. The man in the red jacket leaned in, his breath hot on her face, his hand reaching out to grab her wrist. "No one's listening, sweetheart," he hissed. Anna bolted upright, a ragged scream tearing from her throat. "Get away!" She flailed, striking the empty air, her lungs heaving as if she had run miles. The cabin was pitch black, the fire in the living room dead. Cold sweat drenched her pajamas, turning freezing against her skin. She grabbed the duvet, pulling it up to her chin, her eyes darting around the shadows. The train was gone, but the terror remained, a vibration in her bones that made her teeth chatter. She was alone, just like on the train, just like always. Then the sound cut through the silence. It began low, a mournful note that rose steadily in pitch until it filled the valley outside. It wasn't the chaotic yipping of coyotes or the terrifying bark of a hunting pack. It was a melody, deep, resonant, and impossibly controlled. Anna froze, her breath catching. A second voice joined the first, a higher, clearer tenor weaving around the baritone, creating a harmony that vibrated against the window glass. It was the wolves. They weren't howling at the moon. They were howling at her. The sound wasn't aggressive. It didn't speak of blood or hunger. It was steady, rhythmic, and strangely soothing. It felt like a lullaby sung by the earth itself. The deep baritone, Silver, held the bass note, a solid anchor of sound, while the lighter voice, Shadow, dipped and soared around it. They had heard her scream. Anna swung her legs out of bed, creeping toward the window. She pulled the curtain back an inch. Outside, sitting in the center of the moonlit clearing, sat the 2 silhouettes. Their heads were thrown back, their throats bared to the sky. As she watched, Silver stopped. He lowered his head and looked straight at her window. Even in the dark, she could feel the weight of his gaze. "We are here," he seemed to say. "You are not on the train. You are with us." The panic in Anna's chest unspooled. The phantom sensation of the man's hand on her wrist faded, replaced by the memory of rough fur and warm bodies. She pressed her hand against the cold glass. They weren't just guarding her from physical threats. They were guarding her from the demons in her head. For the first time since the assault, Anna didn't need to turn on the lights to fall back asleep. She simply listened to the song of the monsters outside, knowing they were the only things keeping the real monsters at bay. Chapter 10. The song had ended by dawn, leaving the morning suspiciously quiet. Anna dressed with a newfound determination, the residual fear from the nightmare hardening into a cold resolve. She drank her coffee standing up, watching the tree line. The wolves were gone, likely patrolling the wider territory or hunting, but their absence left the cabin feeling exposed. She needed to check the perimeter. Grabbing her heavy coat and a walking stick, Anna crunched out into the snow. The sun was bright, but it offered no warmth. She walked the edge of the clearing, checking for tracks, for signs of the peace being disturbed. She found it a quarter-mile down the access road. The pristine white blanket of snow had been churned into ugly brown slush. Tire tracks. Heavy, aggressive treads from a truck with snow chains. They had driven right up to her property line, stopped, and backed out. Anna's grip on her walking stick tightened until her knuckles turned white. She followed the footprints that led away from the tire marks, heading into the dense brush near the creek, the exact spot where she had seen Shadow limping from days ago. It didn't take long to find it. Half buried in the snow, chained to the base of a birch tree, was a snare, a wire noose designed to strangle. 10 feet away, hidden under a dusting of fresh powder, was another steel-jawed leg-hold trap, identical to the one she had pried off Shadow's leg. Rage, hot and blinding, flooded Anna's vision. These weren't hunters feeding their families. These were poachers, lazy and cruel, setting traps on private land, maiming animals and leaving them to suffer in the cold. These were the men who had hurt Shadow. These were the men who had made Silver look at her with such desperate pleading. "Not on my land," she spat. She didn't think. She didn't consider the danger. She raised her walking stick and jammed it into the center of the leg-hold trap. Clang! The jaws snapped shut with terrifying speed, biting deep into the hickory wood of her stick. If that had been her foot, or a paw. She wrestled the stick free and moved to the snare, kicking the anchor pin until it loosened from the frozen earth. She coiled the wire and threw it into the creek. She moved down the line, finding another trap, and another. She sprung them all. She destroyed the mechanisms. She was breathing hard, sweating in the cold air, fueled by a protective fury she hadn't known she possessed. She was just bending down to examine a fourth trap when a sound cracked through the crisp air. Crack! Bark exploded from the tree trunk inches from her face. Splinters sprayed her cheek, stinging like wasps. The sound registered a second later. A gunshot. Anna froze, the walking stick slipping from her numb fingers. The silence that followed was heavy, ringing with the echo of the shot. She slowly turned her head toward the road. Standing 40 yards away, leaning against the hood of a battered pickup truck, was a man. He wore camouflage and a hunter-orange hat, his rifle lowered but not safed. He was smiling, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a smile that reminded her of the man in the red jacket on the train. "You're messing with my property, little lady," he called out, his voice carrying easily over the snow. "That's a dangerous game to play alone out here." Chapter 11. Anna couldn't move. The fight-or-flight response that had driven her to smash the traps evaporated, leaving only the paralytic freeze of trauma. Her boots felt nailed to the frozen ground. The man racked the bolt of his rifle, ejecting a spent casing into the snow. The metallic clack-clack was deafening. "I know you," the man said, taking a step off the road and onto her land. The snow crunched loudly under his heavy boots. "You're the city girl living in the old Miller place, all by yourself." He took another step. He wasn't looking at the traps anymore. He was looking at her. His gaze was oily, sliding over her form bundled in the coat. It was the same look, the predatory assessment, the realization that there were no witnesses. "Please," Anna whispered, the word useless and small. "Just go." "I think you owe me for those traps," he sneered, closing the distance. He was 30 yards away. 20. "Hardware isn't cheap. Maybe we can work out a trade." Anna stumbled backward. Her heel catching on a root, she fell hard onto her tailbone, the impact jarring her teeth. She scrambled backward on her elbows, crab-walking through the snow, terror seizing her throat. "Stay back!" she screamed, finding her voice. The man laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "Or what? You gonna throw a snowball at me?" He raised the rifle again, not to shoot, but to intimidate, to dominate. A low rumble vibrated through the ground. It started in the earth, traveling up through the snow, through Anna's body. It wasn't a sound. It was an earthquake. The brush behind the man exploded. 2 shapes blurred into the clearing. They didn't run. They flowed. Liquid violence poured into fur and muscle. Silver hit the ground between Anna and the man, skidding to a halt with a spray of ice. He didn't lunge. He planted his feet, lowered his massive head, and let out a roar that was more dinosaur than canine. Shadow flanked to the right, cutting off the man's retreat to the truck. He was snarling, saliva dripping from bared fangs, his blue eyes burning with murderous intent. The man froze, his rifle wavering. His face went from arrogant to ash gray in a heartbeat. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. These weren't normal wolves. They stood nearly as tall as a man at the shoulder. Silver's hackles were raised, making him look twice his size. He took a step toward the man, his lips peeling back to reveal teeth the length of daggers. The man raised his rifle instinctively toward Silver. Before he could align the sights, Shadow lunged, not to bite, but to snap his jaws inches from the man's hand. The clack of teeth was louder than the gunshot had been. The man flinched violently, dropping the rifle into the snow. Silver stepped forward again. He didn't attack. He just stared. The intelligence in his amber eyes was terrifying. "Pick it up," the look said. "I dare you." The man looked at the rifle, then at the 2 monsters flanking him. He looked at Anna, seeing the protection surrounding her. The predator had become the prey. "I'm going," the man stammered, backing away, hands raised. "I'm going." He turned and scrambled for his truck, slipping and falling in the slush, crawling on hands and knees before yanking the door open. The engine roared to life, tires spinning and squealing as he peeled out in reverse, fishtailing wildly down the road. Silver watched the truck disappear. He didn't chase. He waited until the sound of the engine faded completely into the distance, before he relaxed his hackles and turned around. Chapter 12. The adrenaline crash hit Anna like a physical blow. The moment the truck vanished, the strength left her legs, and she collapsed fully into the snow, gasping for air. Her hands shook so violently she couldn't clasp them together. She was safe. But the terror was still coursing through her, a poison in her blood. Soft steps crunched in the snow. Silver loomed over her. He didn't inspect her for injuries like a dog would. He moved with deliberate care. He stepped over her legs and lay down in the snow, pressing the entire length of his massive, warm side against her chest. He was a living wall, solid and immovable. Shadow appeared on her other side, whining softly. He nudged her cold hand with his wet nose, then curled around her back, sandwiching her between them. The heat was overwhelming. It soaked through her coat, melting the ice in her veins. Anna buried her face in Silver's neck fur. It smelled of pine and musk and life. She could hear his heart beating, slow, steady, powerful. Thump, thump, thump. It was a metronome forcing her own racing heart to slow down. "You came," she sobbed into his fur. "You came back." Silver turned his head, resting his heavy chin on her shoulder. He let out a long exhale, the breath warming her ear. He stayed perfectly still, letting her cry, letting her purge the fear. He wasn't just an animal tolerating a human. He was holding her. Minutes passed. The cold seeped into her legs, but she didn't care. She felt safe. For the first time in her life, she felt completely, undeniably protected. She pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. She looked at Silver. His amber eyes were inches from hers, filled with a gentle, questioning concern. There was no trace of the monster that had terrified the poacher. There was only kindness. Anna reached up, her fingers tracing the silver markings above his eyes. She ran her hand down the side of his powerful jaw. He leaned into her touch, his eyes fluttering shut for a brief second before locking onto hers again. The connection zapped through her again. That strange, electric hum. It felt like recognition. It felt like coming home. "You're not just a wolf," she whispered, her voice trembling. "No animal looks at me the way you do." Silver went still. He stared at her, unblinking. Anna leaned her forehead against his, closing her eyes. "I wish," she breathed, the words slipping out before she could check them. "I wish you were a man. I think I could love a man who protected me like this." Silver stiffened. Anna pulled back, afraid she had spooked him, but he wasn't looking away. He was looking at her with an expression that broke her heart. His ears flattened slightly, and a sound rumbled in his chest. Not a growl, but a whine of profound frustration. His eyes searched hers, desperate and sad. For a moment, the air around him seemed to shimmer, like heat rising off asphalt in the summer. Anna blinked, and the shimmer was gone. Silver stood up abruptly. He looked down at her one last time, a silent apology in his gaze, before turning and trotting toward the woods. He stopped at the tree line, looking back to make sure Shadow was staying with her. Then, with a final, lingering glance, the silver alpha disappeared into the trees, leaving Anna sitting in the snow, her heart aching for a wish she didn't know was already true. Chapter 13. The shutter clicked, a mechanical heartbeat in the frozen silence. Through the telephoto lens, the world was reduced to a singular, breathtaking frame. A bull moose, standing chest-deep in a snowdrift, its breath pluming in the sunlight like dragon smoke. Anna held her breath, steadying her hands against the rough bark of a pine tree. 3 days had passed since the poacher incident. The woods felt reclaimed, purified by the cold and the unspoken protection of the pack. She had ventured further today than ever before, hiking 2 miles up the ridge, emboldened by the knowledge that they were out there. Watching. Always watching. She adjusted the focus ring. The moose's ears swiveled. It stopped chewing the willow branch. Its massive head snapped toward the dense thicket to the east, nostrils flaring. It wasn't looking at her. It was looking past her. Without warning, the 1,000-pound animal bolted. It crashed through the underbrush with the desperation of prey, vanishing over the ridge in seconds. Anna lowered the camera, a prickle of unease sliding down her spine. Moose didn't run like that for nothing. She scanned the thicket. The wind shifted, carrying a scent that hit her on a primal level: musk, rot, and wet fur. It wasn't the clean pine needle scent of the wolves. This was heavy, ancient. A twig snapped. Not a small snap, but the crack of a significant branch breaking under immense weight. 30 yards away, a bush shook violently. A black nose, broad as a dinner plate, poked through the snow-covered leaves. Then a head followed. Then shoulders that seemed to block out the sun. A grizzly bear, a sow, golden brown in the winter light, gaunt from hibernation or hunger, her eyes small and dark. Anna froze. "Don't run!" The survival guide screamed in her memory. "Make yourself big. Back away slowly." The bear sniffed the air, swinging her massive head side to side. Then a soft, high-pitched squall came from behind her. A cub, small and dark, tumbled out of the brush. Anna's stomach dropped through the floor. She was standing between a mother and her cub, the single most dangerous place on earth. The sow saw her. The transition from curiosity to rage was instantaneous. She dropped to all fours, her ears pinned back against her skull, and let out a huff that vibrated in Anna's chest cavity. "Hey, bear," Anna croaked, raising her arms slowly, her voice trembling. "I'm leaving. I'm going." She took a step back. Her boot crunched loudly on the crust of the snow. The sound triggered the charge. The bear exploded forward. It didn't lumber. It flowed. A terrifying wave of muscle and speed covering the distance faster than Anna could comprehend. The ground shook. The roar that ripped from its throat wasn't just a sound. It was a physical force that paralyzed Anna where she stood. She turned to run, knowing it was futile, knowing she was dead. Her boot caught a buried root, and the world tilted. She hit the ground hard, the camera smashing into her ribs. She scrambled, clawing at the frozen earth, trying to drag herself behind the pine tree. The roar was right on top of her. The smell of hot, rancid breath washed over her neck. Anna curled into a ball, squeezing her eyes shut, waiting for the teeth. Waiting for the end. Chapter 14. The air split with a snarl that rivaled the bear's roar. Just as the shadow of the bear fell over Anna, a gray blur missile launched from the ridge above. It struck the bear mid-stride, a kinetic impact of fur and fury that knocked the 700-pound predator sideways. The bear stumbled, roaring in surprise, swiping blindly at the attacker. Silver landed in the snow, skidding on his paws, turning instantly to face the threat. He stood between Anna and the bear, his hackles raised into a razor-sharp ridge, his teeth bared in a grimace of pure aggression. He looked demonic, terrifying, magnificent. From the left, a black streak shot in. Shadow clamped his jaws onto the bear's hind leg, biting down hard before leaping away. The bear spun, roaring in pain, trying to reach the annoying Shadow nipping at her heels. "Silver!" Anna screamed, scrambling to her knees. Silver didn't look at her. He lunged, snapping at the bear's neck, trying to drive her back, away from the human cowering in the snow. He was fast, unnaturally fast, dodging the bear's clumsy swipes with fluid grace. But the size difference was impossible. The bear was a mountain. The wolves were merely boulders. The sow, realizing her cub was exposed, went berserk. She ignored Shadow's harassment and focused on the primary threat. She reared up on her hind legs, towering 10 feet in the air, a wall of golden fur and razor claws. Silver held his ground. He had to. If he moved, the path to Anna was open. He leaped upward, aiming for the throat. It was a brave move. It was a suicide move. The bear caught him in midair. Her massive paw, tipped with 4-inch claws, slammed into Silver's side with the force of a sledgehammer. The sound of breaking ribs cracked through the clearing, sickening and loud. Silver was thrown 20 feet. He smashed against the trunk of a spruce tree with a dull thud and dropped into the snow. He didn't get up. He tried to rise, his front legs scrabbling, but his back legs collapsed. A high, pained whimper escaped his throat. The same sound Anna had heard at her door that first night. "No!" The scream tore from Anna's raw throat. Shadow barked frantically, throwing himself at the bear, but the sow kicked him aside like a rag doll. She dropped back to all fours, huffing, her eyes locking onto the silver form struggling in the snow. She had identified the alpha. She intended to finish him. The bear charged toward the fallen wolf, jaws open, ready to crush his spine. Silver looked up, his amber eyes glazing with pain, baring his teeth in a final, defiant snarl. He couldn't move. He couldn't dodge. Chapter 15, Time Fractured. The world narrowed down to the image of the bear closing in on the silver wolf. Anna saw the bear's teeth. She saw Silver's helplessness. And in that split second, something inside her snapped. The paralysis that had held her captive on the train, the fear that had kept her locked in the cabin. It incinerated. She wasn't the girl on the train anymore. She wasn't a victim. She was part of a pack. Silver had taken the blow meant for her. He was dying because of her. Not again. Not this time. Anna didn't think. She moved on pure instinct, fueled by a love she hadn't dared to name. She scrambled across the snow, ignoring the pain in her bruised ribs, throwing herself into the path of the monster. "Leave him alone!" she shrieked. She reached Silver just as the bear loomed over him. She didn't try to fight. She didn't have claws or fangs. She had only her body. Anna collapsed on top of the wolf, draping herself over his head and chest, shielding his broken body with her own. She buried her face in his neck fur, smelling the copper scent of his blood. She squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the impact, bracing for the claws that would tear her apart. "I've got you," she whispered into his fur, her tears freezing on his coat. "I've got you." Underneath her, Silver stopped struggling. He let out a soft breath against her neck. The bear roared, directly above them. Anna felt the heat of its breath. She felt the displacement of air as the paw raised for the killing strike. "I love you," she thought, the realization ringing clear as a bell in the final moment. Then, the world exploded. It wasn't an explosion of fire or sound. It was a pulse of pure, blinding energy. It started from Silver's body beneath her, a surge of heat that was hotter than the sun, radiating upward through Anna's skin. It blasted outward in a shockwave of white light. The air pressure dropped instantly. A sound like a thunderclap shattered the silence, but it wasn't thunder. It was the sound of a lock breaking, the sound of magic shattering. The bear's roar turned into a squeal of confusion. The shockwave hit the sow, lifting her massive bulk and throwing her backward as if she were made of straw. She landed hard in the snow, scrambled to her feet, terrified by the unnatural light, and bolted into the woods, her cub trailing behind her. Anna didn't see the bear leave. She was blinded by the light, overwhelmed by the heat pulsing beneath her. The wolf's body was changing. The coarse fur was melting away. The shape under her hands was shifting, lengthening, broadening. Bones were snapping and reforming, not in pain, but in restoration. The light flared one last time, turning the world white, and then collapsed into darkness. Chapter 16. Consciousness returned in fragments. The first thing Anna noticed was the heat. The biting cold of the winter air was gone, replaced by a humid warmth rising from the ground. It smelled like a sauna, hot stones and steam. She blinked, her vision swimming. The snow around her had melted into a 10-foot circle of slush and mud. Steam curled off the ground, obscuring the trees in a thick gray fog. She was lying on something warm, something solid, but it didn't feel like fur anymore. It felt like skin. Anna pushed herself up on trembling arms. Her head spun, the edges of her vision graying out. She looked down. The silver wolf was gone. Lying beneath her, half embedded in the mud, was a man. He was stark naked, his body long and powerfully built, cords of muscle defined even in repose. His skin was tanned, steaming in the cold air. But it was the injury that drew her eye. A massive, angry bruise blooming across his ribs, dark purple and red, mirroring the spot where the bear had struck the wolf. Anna couldn't breathe. Her brain refused to process the image. Hallucination, she thought. I hit my head. I'm dying. The man groaned, a low, rough sound that was undeniably human. He shifted, grimacing in pain, and opened his eyes. Amber. They were the same eyes. The exact same shade of molten gold, rimmed with dark brown, the same intelligence, the same soul. They looked up at her, hazy with pain but filled with recognition. He lifted a hand. It was a large hand, callous and scarred, trembling slightly. He reached up and touched her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear. The touch was electric, the same static shock she had felt when the wolf nudged her, but magnified 1,000 times. Anna, he rasped. His voice was deep, gravelly from disuse, but it broke her heart all over again. You, Anna whispered, staring at the silver streaks in his dark, wet hair. You're... He tried to smile, but it turned into a wince. He coughed and a trickle of blood escaped the corner of his mouth. You broke it, he whispered, his eyes sliding shut as exhaustion claimed him. You finally broke it. His hand fell from her cheek, landing heavily in the mud. Anna stared at him, the man who had been her guardian, her wolf, her silence. The adrenaline finally drained from her system, leaving nothing but shock. The world tilted on its axis. The trees spun. The steam swirled. Silver? She murmured. Then the darkness rose up to meet her, and she collapsed across his chest, the two of them lying tangled together in the steam and the snow. Chapter 17. The smell hit her first. Antiseptic, floor wax, and the stale chill of processed air. It was a violent assault on senses that had grown accustomed to pine needles and wood smoke. Anna blinked her eyes open, the fluorescent lights overhead stabbing into her skull like needles. The rhythmic beep, beep, beep of a monitor tethered her to reality. She tried to sit up, but her body felt heavy, disjointed, as if she were wearing a suit made of lead. A sharp pain radiated from her bruised ribs, stealing her breath. She's waking up. Jerry, get the doctor. A face swam into view. Her mother. Older, tired, eyes red-rimmed from crying. Mom, Anna croaked. Her throat felt like sandpaper. Oh, thank God, her mother sobbed, collapsing into the chair beside the bed and gripping Anna's hand. We thought, when they called us, we thought you were gone. Anna looked around the room. Sterile white walls. Get-well flowers. Her father pacing by the window, looking uncomfortable in his suit. The window showed a parking lot, gray and slushy. Civilization. Where? Anna started, panic fluttering in her chest. Where is he? The doctor is coming, her mother soothed, stroking her hair. No. Anna pulled her hand away. The wolf, the man, Silver. Her parents exchanged a worried glance, the kind reserved for children who are feverish or broken. Honey, you're confused, her father said gently, stepping forward. You had a severe concussion. You were attacked by a bear. 2 hikers found you unconscious in the woods. They carried you 4 miles to the trailhead. Hikers, Anna repeated, the word tasting like ash. The memory of the steam, the mud, and the amber eyes flashed in her mind. It hadn't been a hallucination. She knew what she had felt. "We're taking you home, Anna," her mother said firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. "As soon as you're discharged. Seattle. We've already packed up your apartment. No more cabins. No more running away. It's not safe for you." The walls of the room seemed to shrink. The beeping of the monitor sped up. Seattle. The trains. The crowds. The silence of people who didn't care. "I can't go back," Anna whispered. "You have to," her father said. "You almost died alone out there." A knock at the door interrupted them. It was a heavy, authoritative rap that silenced the room. The door swung open. Anna's heart stopped, then hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. 2 men stood in the doorway. They filled the frame, blocking out the hallway light. They were identical, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell messily over their foreheads. But they weren't the same. The man on the left wore a flannel shirt unbuttoned at the top. His arm was in a heavy medical sling, strapped tight against his chest. He moved stiffly, guarding his ribs. His jaw was set in a hard line, his expression stoic and intense. And his eyes? His eyes were amber, molten gold. The man on the right leaned against the doorframe, favoring his left leg. He had a softer energy, a chaotic warmth radiating from him. His eyes were a piercing, glacial blue. "Can we help you?" Anna's father asked, stepping between the bed and the strangers. The man with the amber eyes didn't even look at her father. His gaze was locked on Anna, intense and devouring, checking every inch of her for damage. "We're the hikers," he said. His voice was deep, a baritone rumble that Anna felt in her toes. It was the voice of the lullaby. "We're here to check on Anna." "Peter?" Anna breathed, the name falling from her lips instinctively, though she had never heard it before. The amber-eyed man nodded once. "Anna." "And Cade," the blue-eyed man added, grinning crookedly as he limped into the room. "Don't forget the favorite." "You found her?" Her mother stood up, wiping her eyes. "Oh, thank you. You saved our daughter's life." "She saved ours," Peter said, his voice rough. He walked past her parents as if they were furniture, coming to stand right beside the bed. The scent coming off him, rain, ozone, musk, buried the antiseptic smell of the hospital. "Mom, Dad," Anna said, her voice suddenly steady. "Can you give us a minute, please? But, please." Reluctantly, her parents retreated into the hallway, closing the door. The moment the latch clicked, the air in the room shifted. The tension broke. Cade hopped onto the foot of the bed, wincing slightly as he adjusted his leg. Peter stood by her pillow, his good hand reaching out to hover over hers, trembling slightly. "You're real," Anna whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "You're both real. We told you," Peter said softly, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "We guard what is ours. We weren't going to let you wake up alone." Chapter 18. "So, it's a curse?" Anna asked, looking from one twin to the other. "Was a curse," Cade corrected, picking at a loose thread on the hospital blanket. "Past tense, thanks to you." 3 years, Peter explained, his amber eyes dark with the memory. "A warlock, a business rival of our father's who didn't like that the local pack controlled the land he wanted to strip mine. He trapped us. He said since we acted like beasts to protect our territory, we could stay beasts." He paused, his jaw tightening. "The condition was that we would remain wolves until a human deemed us worth dying for. Not a pet, not a trophy, but an equal." "We thought it was impossible," Cade said quietly, his playfulness vanishing. "Humans, they took everything from us. Why would one ever die for us?" Peter leaned closer, his heat radiating against Anna's arm. Then you opened your door in a blizzard. You saved Cade's leg. You gave us a home. And then you threw yourself in front of a bear, Cade added, his blue eyes shimmering. You shielded the alpha with your own body. You valued his life over yours. I loved him, Anna blurted out. Silence filled the room. Peter went still. Cade smiled, a slow, knowing grin. I mean, Anna stammered, her face heating. I loved the wolf. I didn't know. We are the wolf, Anna, Peter said intense. There is no separation. The man you see now is the same soul that slept by your bed, the same heart that beat against your back in the snow. He took her hand fully now, interlacing their fingers. We are twin alphas. We share the pack. We share the burden of leadership. He looked at his brother, then back at Anna. And we share our mate. Anna's breath hitched. Mate? You saved both of us, Peter said, his voice dropping to a growl. You healed him with your hands. You saved me with your courage. By pack law, by old magic, and by the choice of our own hearts. You belong to us, and we belong to you. Cade leaned forward, resting his hand on her ankle. We know your parents want you to go back to the city, to the noise, to the place where you were hurt. But we have a cabin, Peter murmured. It's quiet. The woods are deep, and nothing, man or beast, will ever touch you again. Anna looked at the closed door where her parents were waiting with plane tickets and promises of a normal life. A life of locking doors and looking over her shoulder. Then she looked at the two men, the protector and the companion, the ones who had listened to her silence and filled it with a song. She squeezed Peter's hand. She kicked Cade gently with her foot. I hate this city, she whispered. Peter's smile was slow, sharp, and devastatingly beautiful. The snow was falling again, fat, lazy flakes that drifted down to coat the porch railing in white. But this time, the cabin wasn't cold. Smoke curled from the chimney, thick and gray. Inside, the fire was roaring. Anna sat on the swing bench, a thick wool blanket wrapped around her legs. She had her camera in her lap, scrolling through the photos of a silver wolf posing in the sunlight. The front door opened. Cade stepped out, holding 2 mugs of steaming cocoa. He wasn't limping anymore. He handed one to Anna and sat down next to her, pressing his warm side against hers. He's still splitting wood, Cade laughed, blowing on his drink. I told him we have enough for 3 winters, but he says he needs to secure the perimeter. Anna smiled, resting her head on Cade's shoulder. He worries. He loves, Cade corrected softly. From the side of the house, the rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack of an axe stopped. Peter walked around the corner, his flannel shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing the faint silver scar on his forearm. He wiped sweat from his brow, his amber eyes locking onto Anna immediately. He always needed to know where she was. He walked up the steps, the snow crunching under his boots. He didn't say a word. He just leaned down and kissed Anna, a slow, claiming press of lips that made her toes curl in her wool socks. Cold? He asked, pulling back just an inch. Never, Anna promised, looking at her 2 wolves. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the pines. But Anna didn't flinch. She wasn't alone in the dark anymore. She was the heart of the pack, and for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged. Thank you so much for joining me in the mountains today for Anna and the Twin Alphas story. I hope you found as much comfort in their happy ending as I did writing it. If you enjoyed this story, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. It's a small gesture that truly makes a huge difference in helping these stories reach more listeners. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. If you were in Anna's shoes, hearing that scratching at the door during a blizzard, Would you have been brave enough to let the wolves in? Thank you again for your time and your support. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next story.